Okay, so last episode we ended up doing all the cam timing. Since then, all I've done is just drop a couple of the ancillaries on, more so just to make sure that I've got everything than them actually needing to be on the engine. So a couple of bits that we've got here. So water pump's gone on, or water pump blank. I've just gone round, and then like we said at the end, I've just Loctited all of the cam bolts. Stuck the little lock tab on, torqued that up, and then knocked the lock tab over. Oil flinger's gone on the right way. So that's all set, ready to go. So we'll put the timing cover on today. And then just a couple of little blanks on the back. So we're not using the fuel pump drive for the drain. That goes into the back of the gearbox, but I'll show you that in another episode. The billet tappet covers there, they've gone on. Dry deck fitting, so I've just put that on now just to make sure. So on the 998s, the transfer housing sits in a slightly different place because of the deck height on the block. So you just have to flatten the bottom off. So I've just checked all of that. Dizzy blank's gone in, so nothing too major. So what we're going to do this time, I'm going to stick the timing cover on and then have a quick look around, see what I can work out for the crank position sensor bracket. So we're using the new med setup with their S damper and trigger wheel. So I've just got to go around and make sure that I knock the tooth off in the right place and make sure the bracket works for our engine setup. My only concern there is that we use the pressed steel Mark 1 engine mount bracket, mainly because it's lighter, but that tends to sit in a slightly different place. So I've just got to make sure that we've got enough room for the crank pulley, the belt, the sensor and everything without having to swap the mount over, which realistically, if nothing fits, the mount is what will get swapped because it's cheapest. Nothing else has changed too much. We'll probably fit the cylinder head in this episode too, only because I'm short of one gearbox gasket, so that can't go in yet. That'll stop us fitting the transfer housing, the RTS, things like that. So we'll see if we can get the head fitted, and then I'll go through the specs on the head whilst we're doing it. But otherwise, have a quick look at the time lapse. So that time lapse was just going to show me tightening the cover down. The only thing I've done since is just drop the crank pulley back on just to check the alignment, the spacing, and then make sure that I've got enough room for the crank sensor. So the only thing I've remembered since is with the med setup, so the S damper and their crank sensor kit, it's not really designed anymore to go with the standard cover. It still fits, so that sits about there. The problem being, when you use it with a standard backplate, you have studs here rather than bolt holes that they would have in their alley covers or the belt drive. Now, whilst the belt drive will be going on our new car, new engine, there's just no point spending 400 quid on this one when this does a perfect job. So what we've got is small spacers. Now that one will work perfectly fine here once we get a longer bolt, but this one I'm going to need to make a spacer that is in effect threaded the whole way through. So I need to be able to thread it down onto that stud and then thread a bolt into the top of it, just to sit the sensor in the right place. Slows things down a bit. It's a bit of a ball ache, but I can see why they've done it. They've effectively just improved the setup on their own kits. It just leaves a bit of a gap in the market for using standard components. Now, the plan is, with our EFI kits that will come out probably in about a month or two, is we're going to use this setup. So I know Med used to make the adapters, so I'm going to ask them if they can bring them back out again, or that'll come as part of our kit as part of the EFI setup. So you'll get the Med crank damper, the Med sensor, and then you'll just get some of our own adapters. The only other thing we've done here is a small little cutout on the side. You can probably see it better from above. Not really, if it focuses. So the only reason we've done that is on our turbo mount, or the outlet of our turbo comes basically here and points this way, just to give us a load of clearance down the back of the car. So we've always just kind of scalloped that out just to give us a little bit of extra space. We've got our own breather on here, so you'll notice this is just a standard cover that I welded a blank onto probably about 8 years ago. Small little tube onto the top, so then this vents into the rocker cover at the top, and then the rocker cover into our catch tank. So not too crazy a setup. Once I've sorted the bracket for the crank sensor, then I'll go down and I'll tighten up the crank pulley, put the lock and wheel on, and then work out where the missing tooth is going to go. The only other thing I've done since is just mark, I don't know if you're going to see that because it's kind of dark, so the blue paint pen. So I've just marked where TDC is on the pulley. So all I've done there is just put the DTI back on the piston. I haven't done it with the degree wheel. All I've done is similar to what we did with the push rod. So run to a set point pre and post the top on the DTI, and then mark either side. And then I've just put a mark right in the middle, which is then going to be our TDC mark. That just means that when we come to time this up, hopefully in a couple of days, we've got a marker that tells us roughly where we should be with the timing light. But for now, we'll get back into the cylinder head. So I think that's going to be the next thing that will go on now, other than transfer housing, gearbox, which we're sort of stuck with until the rest of the gaskets turn up, hopefully tomorrow. And then we're not too far away from having a complete engine. The thing that's probably going to take me the time is grinding the inside of the rocker cover out, because we were using a standard alloy cover with the standard rocker gear, but they won't fit with the roller rockers. So we'll do a little show and tell once we've ground all of that out. But for now, I'll show you the head. Right, so we've actually sorted a solution out for the crank sensor bracket. It wasn't too brutal in the end. So we've just put a longer bolt through the front spacer, so that's fine, that's not a problem at all. And then on the rear spacer, because it has to slip over one of these clinch studs, what we actually did was helicoil each side of the spacer to bring it back to M6. Then what we've ended up doing is basically winding the spacer on as if it was a nut, and then bolting into the backside. All I've then done is just set the spacing for the sensor itself. The only thing left to do now, once we're a bit closer, is just knock the tooth out on the trigger wheel. So these are a 36:1, so 36 teeth with one missing. And then that missing tooth just needs to go 90 degrees before TDC for the sensor to sit at the right time. So we'll get that measured up later on. That's nice and easy to do kind of once we're closer. I can't tighten up the crank pulley just yet because we haven't got the transfer housing on, we haven't got the clutch and the flywheel in for me to be able to lock the engine back up. So we'll dig into the cylinder head. So we alluded to in the last video, this is really not that special. In hindsight, we probably should have gone a lot wilder than we have, but previously I was advised against it by someone else. So we're going to run with this for now. This is probably going to be the choke point for the 200 horsepower goal. If we don't get there, I'll see if budget allows me to throw a big cylinder head at it and then see what we can make. But turbo shaped cylinders, so it's basically just had the nose taken off it down the bottom, and then these are 26cc in size, all nice and the same. This was done probably about 10 years ago now. if not longer, by Ben Ross, who's not around anymore, but did a really good job. We've had a couple of bits and pieces done since. So I had 3-angle valve seats put in it, and a couple of new valves just that were a bit scored up, but they are still small sizes. So 29.7 exhausts, 33.3 I think on the inlets. So it's technically a small valve 940 cast-in, so it's not the big MG cast-ins. Again, that'd probably be an easy jump if we were to just slap on a big valve 26cc head and go from there. But finding one at reasonable money in the right sort of time frame is pretty impossible at the minute. Port wise, see if I can grab a torch so we can actually see it. They're nothing too crazy, bit hard to see. So real mild porting, nothing too massive on the sizes. With a turbo spec, you don't really need to go that big. It's more about trying to get the port floor in the right shape. So you could go massive, but you don't really gain anything because of the way the turbo setup kind of lends itself. So all I'm going to do is start dropping the head studs in. I'll probably do that on a time lapse because there's not really anything to talk about. It's a BK450 gasket, so we've used those for years, thrown a shed load of boost through them before without any real problems. I know there's a bit of scaremongering online at the minute, but touch wood, we've never had issues, so we're just going to keep going as we were. The only thing that we need to do kind of special on this one is because we've gone 11 stud, the water pump end stud drilling goes straight through into the waterway. So it's a slightly different torque for that one. And we also just end up putting a little bit of RTV sealant around the thread just as we wind the bolt in. ARP studs don't need to go in tight, literally just sort of wind them in with your fingers. Nothing too crazy. They don't need to be tightened into the block. The tension is done with the nut on the other end. So just finger tight, nice and easy. Then we'll drop the gasket over, drop the head on, make sure everything's nice and lined up, nice and seated. And then we'll go around and we'll put ARP lube on, all the nuts, all the washers, and then we'll start going around tightening in sequence. Cool, so all you saw me do there was just lower everything down. So studs, as we say, they're just in hand tight. I did wind them in with an Allen key, but that's just to make it a bit quicker, just to fit them in, but don't put them in tight at all, literally just nip them up. Cylinder heads dropped on, popped in the push rods. I've dropped the rocker assembly on, but you would have seen that I've backed off all of the adjusters. So they're all the way out. The last thing you want to do is start torquing the head down and then all of a sudden you snap one of your really nice new shiny roller rockers because you haven't backed them all the way off. We'll adjust those later, but they don't need to be anywhere close right now. So all I'm going to do is just put a couple of little drops. I say drops, it's a paste. So a small amount of the ARP assembly lube just onto the threads of the bolts or the studs, and then we'll go around and torque everything up. So I do this center out on all of them. There is different torque figures for the rocker studs, the main studs, and I do a different torque figure for the two outer 11 studs as well. And all I do is I'll set the torque wrench at the lowest, which is I think 25 foot-pounds, do everything. Then I'll go up to the next step, which is 40 foot-pounds, then do all of those that are going to be at 40 and above, and then the last step, which is 50 foot-pounds for the main 9 studs, and then I just do the main 9, all in the same pattern. I won't do on this one, but I have done before, as I've done the whole torque process, then loosened everything up, and then redone the torque process again. Not going to do it on this one because it's going to get hot running once it's in the car. So I'll basically fire this up and run it until it's hot to the touch, but without any coolant in it, just to get it really hot really quick, and then I'll shut it off. All that does is it basically sets the head gasket. So the head gasket has got, I suppose, sealant built into the material. That basically allows that to melt to a certain point and then glue itself together basically. Then we'll leave it overnight, re-torque it cold the next morning, then we'll fill it with coolant, then we'll go into the running procedure, but we'll go through that in more detail when it actually comes to running in. For now, what I'll do is I'll stick you on a time lapse again, and then you can watch me go through the torque process, and then we'll get back to it at the end. Right, so I've just done the rocker studs. So they're the smallest one with a different size socket, so it makes sense to do them first. So now we're just going through center out. So basically just working a spiral outwards. So I'm going to do them all to 33 Newton meters, which is 25 foot-pounds, I think, or 20. And then just work in the same sequence all the way around. And then all we do is just step up each time. So that way you don't need to worry about forgetting any. There we go. Right, so now we'll just tick off the step on the sheet. So next step for me is 40 Newton meters. So that works out, so 30 foot-pounds. So we basically do 25 foot-pounds, 30 foot-pounds, 50 foot-pounds, but new torque wrenches works in Newton meters. So this one's going to be 40. So that's the final torque for the 11 studs. So I'll do all of the 11 studs. And then on the next step, we only do the main 9. So again, center out. In the same circular pattern. Now you'll feel things move as you do this. So it'll feel like certain studs have loosened up since you did them on the last pass, and that's because they have, basically. Right, so that's the 11 stud done, and then we'll just tick that one off as well. And then the mains, so I'm actually going to do a 4th step, just because I feel like it. So the next final torque is 67 Newton meters, which is a bit of a jump from 40. So we're going to go up to 40 foot-pounds or 54 Newton meters first, and then do that as the same pattern. So this is just the main 9 now. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right, so then the next one, 67. So again, same pattern, same studs, but this is the final step. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All done. So as I said, we won't loosen and reset those this time, but once we run it in hot, we'll then do a retorque of the head and then check everything over. But for now, bar roughly setting the tappets, we're about as far as we can go this time until the gearbox gaskets turn up, ready for us to put the box on. So we're sort of there. I'm going to do a bit of fiddling around off camera just with the trigger wheel, and then I'll start having a look at what we need to do to clearance the rocker cover. But otherwise, that's pretty much us set for this video, I think. So gearbox build, or gearbox will go on in the next video along with the transfer housing, the clutch, and that'll basically be the engine side of things built and done. Don't think we have anything else to check or clearance. No. So that'll be probably part 4. So that'll be the end of the engine build. Then I'll do a video going through all of the individual pieces, so the turbo kits, the inlets, the ducting, the cooling package, things like that, just as a kind of side piece. And then once the engine's in, once the engine's all bolted up, which I'll probably just do as a short, then we'll get into the 20-minute run in, and then hopefully either end of this year or potentially early January, we'll try and get a day at the dyno, and then keep fingers crossed and we'll see if we can hit 200. Who knows, 200 or bust. But if there's any questions, any comments, anything you'd like to see in the next one, give us a shout, drop a like, drop a comment. See you in the next one. Thanks, guys.